Hey everyone, we're live on LinkedIn. I'm
All
Jose
right.
Mal. Hey, I'm Jose Maldonado, accompanied by Mike Bright, Senior Operations Manager with Divergent, and Emily Carson, who is not only VP of Technology, but also a Women in Tech champion. What's up, guys?
What's happening?
What's up, you guys?
Apparently, Windows 365.
All right, so I'm going to start this session with a question for y'all. The sidelines at the Buffalo Bills game, everybody's on a Microsoft Surface. You know my love for the Bills. Are they running Windows 11 or Windows 365?
Neither. It's a trick question. The 1967 Corvette didn't come with the...
Come on, y'all.
Mike,
what do you think? I think it's a trick question.
I think it's a loaded question. It's probably still Windows 10. I don't know if professional athletes would have enough technical knowledge to be able to troubleshoot a compatibility issue on the sidelines.
I would agree. I definitely
see Belichick chucking that thing.
I feel like that's an opportunity for us to go stand on the sidelines and offer support during those games.
I tell you what, if you go, I'd be right there behind you.
All right.
You go first. Especially if it's, with the wintertime, when you would fare better in the wintertime than myself. I don't know about Mike. I do not prefer the cold. So for that reason alone, I'm out.
I don't do cold.
Yeah. Yeah. So, so Windows 365, guys. We were talking about, this is a part two of a three-part series, and we were talking about Windows 11, a full solution, right? So we discussed Windows 11 in just a little bit, right? And Windows 365 was released, and I guess there's a lot of questions around it, and I got some questions just right off the rip. So how do you think Windows 365 fits as a part of a Windows 11 solution?
I kind of struggled to understand the purpose of the product at all when it was first announced, because we already have Windows Virtual Desktop and Azure Virtual Machine. So I was kind of wondering why we needed a different flavor. But to me, I think with the rapid deployment of folks needing bring your own device solutions, the ability to obviously spin those up operating system agnostic, it seems like it's a good fit for not only a personal use type, just basic Office 365 subscription to supplement that, but I could see it being used in the enterprise as well. I don't know if that answers your question specifically around Windows 11, but it would be a lot easier to migrate those endpoints that are provisioned in the cloud versus having to identify, connect, and then push payload down to a physically connected device. So obviously there's some perks there.
Okay, so I think that being that you've worked a lot with Azure Virtual Desktop and things of that nature, in the computing pools, to ask, but what's the difference then? What's the difference between Azure VD and Windows 365?
So I'm still trying to wrap my head around that completely, but one of the main things that I've kind of noticed is that with the Azure, the host pool, so you're creating one large, you have the ability to create one large host pool where your end users can all connect and share or, simultaneously use the same resources on that host pool, and it can be scaled up or down based on need. But it's still managed just the way an enterprise asset would be with, antivirus, policy, all the things that you would typically have to apply to one of those devices, where yes, you can do the same thing with a Windows 365 machine. You can, you can create deployment policies and assign users that and they get a specific build. But you can also kind of let Microsoft do the work for you. You're able to basically, there's a setting, I believe, and I can't tell you exactly what it's called, but I know that you have the ability to have Microsoft manage patching and that sort of thing on your behalf. The other thing is your persistent desktop lives up in the cloud. Let's say that you're doing 8K editing, video editing, and you've got to transfer those large files between yourself and the person who's doing the final touches on the raw video footage. You've got like a 2 gig internet connection on that endpoint. So if you want to transfer large files between you and another person up in the cloud, I mean, it's almost instant. So you're not going to have to wait 3 or 4 days for, 30, 40 gigs. And obviously that's an exaggeration, but that amount of data it's going to be pretty seamless with those devices hosted in the cloud. So quicker access to your data and portability.
The other thing I was thinking about, Mike, be curious to hear your thoughts on this, and Jose. When we think about building Windows 365 into a Windows 11 solution, I go to hardware where organizations maybe haven't done a refresh cycle in a long time, and that particular device can't support Windows 11. There's still a way to use hardening standards within the Windows 365 environment and not have to incorporate such a refresh immediately. I think the other thing that I think about is the opportunity to open up a BYOD program for organizations, because, if we can get away with a slimmer hardware option, but yet it does, it's really offset by the power of the cloud component for Windows 365, being able to break down an organization into use cases that we know, can always connect with Windows 365 and do not need kind of that stagnant OS with Windows 11. So when I think about implementation and getting more, tactile in the approach and solution implementation, that's kind of where I'm thinking too. I don't know if you guys have thought about that piece at all.
So I thought about the 2 scenarios, right? And I've mentioned this from the beginning. Windows 11, right? It can be a standalone solution. However, for it to be a full and complete solution, you've got to take into consideration, like you just mentioned, the hardware, right? There's going to be a lot of hardware out there that not be compatible, and you have organizations out there that have 10, 30, 50, 80,000 devices, right? So when we're talking about, hey, 25% of the fleet is incompatible, right, with Windows 11, let's say. So for an 80,000 device organization, that is a big chunk, right? I mean, for 10,000 device, the computers just are not getting any cheaper nowadays, right? So if they were to offer some sort of, let's say, Windows 365, so let's say that we add Windows 365 to our Windows 11 solution, right? So now the model is hybrid. At this point, Windows 11 goes on all the computers that can manage and are compatible with Windows 11. And then for those that are not, we can leverage Windows 365. And then over time, right, we can swap a lot of these workstations out if need be, right? Because then that can switch you to a different model. Now, these models will vary, right, based on the healthcare or finance. The life cycle management is different, and the business needs are different, right? So you have a lot of organizations that are kind of further behind in the technology, not just the hardware. But for those that, let's say with the hybrid work model, now that you have a lot of folks working from home and are not returning back to the workplace. So what happens when these organizations continue to hire on and broaden their workforce? So instead of shipping a laptop after having an image of provision or what have you, pay FedEx $38 for it to get there at a certain time of the week, or hopefully right before they start.
Yeah, I wish it was that cheap also.
I wish it was $48. Keep going.
I just throw it out there. Okay. But at the same time, so what if your new hires can start with their own hardware, right? And then basically just have a Windows 365 cloud PC provisioned and ready to go for them. And then, maybe you spend the first day, first couple hours of the day getting them connected to all the systems that they need to be connected to, secure, reliable. Again, this is scalable, right? So you can literally go from 10,000, you can have a 10,000 device or 10,000 user organization with having maybe, let's say, 4,500 of them working remotely, but now you want to scale. Right now it's 2022, you want to scale to, or you feel the need to scale to another 2,000 employees, right? This is just a blanket scenario. But then you can, instead of having to go out and purchase 2,000 pieces of hardware, now you can just do it, issue them Windows 365, and they can run it from their own hardware. And because they're connecting to, the Microsoft Cloud, they don't have to have the most robust hardware, because of the fact that they're going to have sufficient enough in capability and capacity in their virtual cloud PC.
And this is compatible even like on an iPad, right? Like I can take my
Android phone,
iPad.
iPad, as long as it can stream a Netflix movie, I think is how it was advertised. It should be able to run this.
Yeah.
The other thing, like you don't have to, so, you mentioned, several thousand people using, the technology, like for instance, Windows Virtual Desktop, you've got 2,000 people connecting to a host pool, and you need to do a patching event. That's 2,000 people that can't work. Mm-hmm. This is all subscription and license based. So you bring people in, you scale up, the project wraps, you scale back down. Your licensing cost spikes for however long those folks were using the technology, and then you can kind of level off back to normal. And you're not tracking that asset from cradle to grave and the chain of custody of who has it. Is the data okay? Has it been destroyed to DoD standards? I mean, it's all up in the cloud. And again, scale up and then scale down when you no longer need it.
Actually, Mike, that's a really good point. Because of the subscription-based service, there's cost containment opportunity there as well, right? So, here at Divergent, we scale up, many times over the course of the year for project-based resources for large-scale projects. Instead of us having to negotiate an EA where we're always bound to a certain number of licensing, being able to approach it with a scalable license allows us that opportunity for cost containment as well. So I think that's a really good kind of option, if you know that you have busy times of the year as well, or more project-based resources. Yeah. Okay,
so let me ask you a question, right? If I'm asking the experts, hold on, let me switch up here. Let's ask the expert. Okay, so is Windows 365 reliable?
Yeah.
Well, I could answer that question with the question: is Azure reliable?
Okay, so and that's a good question. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, from my experience, yes. I mean, we've had some service outages where individual services have been affected, but I think there was a login or an identity issue a couple of months ago where logging in was difficult, if not impossible, for several users. But I mean, other than that, it's been pretty solid.
So I've got to say this. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, but the other thing is when I look and think about Azure as a whole, the investment that Microsoft continues to make in the data center expansions across the world, essentially, that not only will allow for better service, but there's further redundancy built in, right? So, like the data, if our center goes down, we've got an immediate failover to another, and as more and more data centers and that investment and spend within cloud resources continues, I think, an outage of any kind is going to be few and far between at large scale.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was in somewhere in Ohio. I want to say Dayton, Ohio, some years back. And then I was driving from the airport to the client site, and the driver says, "You see that big warehouse over there?" And it must have been like 300,000 square feet. I said, "Yeah." I said, "That's going to be one of Microsoft's new data centers." And this is when I'm still in my mind trying to grasp the Azure concept. This is back 2015, 2016. So it was all very, very new to me. But in terms of redundancy, it does work well, because I've literally have had a laptop die on me anywhere. Get on my phone, get on my iPad from there. So this has been kind of like the argument I have with some of my tech friends. Some folks don't care for Microsoft, right? And the only thing they have Microsoft in the environment are servers and the OS and several components. But with things of, let's say, video conferencing, they use something other than Teams. They use Zoom or this or that. Say, oh, Zoom offers this, now Zoom offers that, and then they will not call me to say hello. But if Teams is down for a fraction of a second, they'll call me and say, "I heard Teams was down today." I'm like, wait a minute. But then, Zoom will go down and then this one will go down. I remember doing a project up in Dallas and, Chrome went down for a day, Google Chrome. You can't help it. It's going to happen, right? So there's going to be some downtime. It isn't perfect. It's like if something runs on your laptop and for some reason, Emily, like you just experienced, you got to restart your laptop. Okay, well, technically that's downtime at that point, right? So it's going to happen. Is it reliable enough though? And I will have to say yes. And Azure is so robust. It reminds me of when a doctor, graduates from med school, or when a student graduates from med school, and eventually they choose a focus, right? We're in a certain area or specialty of medicine, and they're not just practicing all over the place. So Azure to me, is the same thing. Is that you can't you can't be the expert on everything Azure, right? So you have to kind of pick and choose because at this point it's just a beast, but it is extremely reliable. So the other question is, you already answered this one. Is it scalable? You guys just answered that, and I gave a partial answer, right? But is it now? My next question: is it secure? That's the biggest, to me, hurdle, and it could be psychological that organizations have had and has kept them from going to the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, from a security perspective. My viewpoint is there really is nothing more secure than a cloud environment. It's just that, especially one where I control and contain the information and the data that my team members are transacting with, right? So versus a generalized, OS where we're constantly saving locally, that's my information that's sitting out on somebody's device that, could potentially be, hacked or some sort of, malintent actually occurs. Additionally, it's easy to have that information get out. When I have a container and that's, essentially what Windows 365 is, right? It allows us to keep our devices essentially, cloud-based and really in a containerized area. That stays with me, that stays with the organization. And I think that's super important, especially as you look at regulated industries such as healthcare. Having control of that data and knowing where it's at during, every transaction state is important.
No, I agree with you, but I just want to say, just a disclaimer for the record, we're going to use the term container loosely for the conversation. All right, so if it is reliable, then I'm assuming that you can ensure business continuity. Would you say yes?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at what you have to go through from a business continuity, and Mike, this is like should be top of mind because we just did a DR drill last week. As part of our ongoing continuity planning. Having the redundancy built into the cloud when there's an application failure and being able just to move over to another service area within Azure, that gets you, a minimal downtime. So I think about it, Mike, think about when we're in the hospital systems and when there's a downtime and having to fall back to paper procedures, the paper charting, the paper prescribing, that just is not a sustainable method now with the way the healthcare industry is. So I think the ability when you're thinking about business continuity and being able to build in that disaster recovery planning around, a separated Azure environment and cloud-based environment versus on-prem is just, it just minimizes your risk for the organization.
And you're kind of offloading that work to Microsoft as well. I mean, really, it's up to them to maintain the data center, the services within the data center, and then the redundancy between data centers, physical locations. I mean, your responsibility as a business owner is just to ensure that the internet connection out to the cloud is there and redundant. I mean, if there's a fiber cut, you should have a backup, connection anyway. If that stuff out there is mission critical. So, I mean, yeah, that's your DR is. Yep. Can we the internet? Yes, we're good.
Yeah, I think there's so many layers there to Azure. I think that they just work well. Right? We can sit here and we can explain it all day. but they do work well. There are a couple giants out there. We know that AWS is a giant in that space, and we know that Google is also a giant in what they do in the cloud space. I think Microsoft is unique in certain areas, and that's not to say that, hey, I am a Microsoft. I don't know. I'm team Microsoft all the way down. You cut my veins, I bleed Microsoft. But at the same time, no matter how many Microsoft shirts I own, but at the same time, I look at what works well. So believe it or not, I want to say about 10 years ago, I think I bought my first Mac, and I wanted to do everything Mac. I wanted to log into my Windows systems from my Mac, and try to incorporate it into the organizational network. And I found that it was more cumbersome to try to run Windows systems and do my work from a Mac logging into Windows systems. So I figured, hey, Windows to Windows would work, great. So when I look at a lot of the components that we use, so I don't really consider a Google, I don't really consider AWS, because I'm thinking, okay, so in this particular space, it wouldn't work unless you're talking about, SQL, data warehousing. But then again, we've got excellent solutions through Azure, right, for that as well. Emily, we've done some of those projects this year. So, and even internally. So, so I think when I tell you that, hey, Microsoft Azure, Microsoft Windows, say Windows 10, I think Windows 10 is just phenomenal. If I compare it to going back to the XP days and how we've come from there, and Windows 7 was good, but Windows 10 just kind of connected you to all those cloud pieces and components that Windows 7 didn't, and not to mention all the other capabilities of the OS.
You missed Windows 8.
Okay, so that's another. 8 is almost falling into the bucket of Windows ME. So, but what I'm saying is that it does work well when think of organizations that are trying other solutions, alternatives to the Windows OS. There are huge mountains to climb. Not to that, but at the same time, you're almost deprecating or scaling back on your capabilities, right? So that's why when I tell you it just works, it just works. No, I can't make the decision for an organization of 85,000 devices that wants to save money, in their IT budget when it comes to Microsoft licenses or whatever have you. I get it, right? But I'm saying what works well, and I'm saying, hey, Azure, in terms of, let's say, Windows 365, I've been working with it for about a month now, and it's flawless. I can literally get on Teams and make phone calls, and the pass-through audio and microphone. When I log in from my bigger laptop, I use 2 screens. It automatically switches to 2 screens. The graphics is great, and I don't. I was not lucky enough to get all the resources on that cloud PC that were necessary. So I think I'm like at 8 gigs of memory and maybe 2 cores, Mike. But it works well, and I was surprised. So I'm thinking to myself, all right, so how easy it is to get connected, get a new hire connected to the network, to the job, and into the systems that they need to using this. And I think that it would work well. And again, if the laptop dies, Mike, what happens if someone's laptop just dies? Can you fix it remotely?
Typically, no. I mean, unless there is an on-site manufacturer's warranty and somebody's okay with a strange technician coming to their home in the middle of a global pandemic, then that's
yeah,
that's
exactly.
But typically, it's a swap. Reconfigure, transfer settings, ship the old one back, repair it, and then put it back into service.
What's the timeline?
Process.
What is the shortest possible timeline for something like that?
I mean, you're looking at a day at least for the shipping plus the preparation before the shipping. So I mean, you could miss that pickup window, and it could be a solid 2 days before the new device is in your hand.
Yeah, so that was downtime for that user, and depending on what the user's role is, right, it could impact the department or the business, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm sorry, Emily, you were saying?
I was going to say also the costs, the shipment costs going and back and forth, especially when you look at having to minimize downtime by next day. I mean, the costs associated with shipping are just, they continue to rise. So
Yep.
And I know we only have about 2 minutes left, Jose. Are there other questions?
Well, so I just wanted to add that if my laptop goes down, I can literally grab my daughter's laptop, sign into Windows 365, and not that I have to ignore the Hello Kitty sticker on there, but at least I can get back up and running. So my thing is this: I wanted to ask Windows 365. So now that we've experienced COVID, right, and it's been a while now. It's probably been a year or more that we've been enduring the pandemic. So Windows 365, where does it fit in that landscape looking forward? Can it survive a pandemic? Is it the solution during such crises?
I mean, it is the solution for something like that. I look at, again, I'll go back to just the device aspect that, organizations had to quickly remove standardization just to get people some sort of device that they could take home with them for a year and a half versus, guess what, you can repurpose your home PC for, starting tomorrow because here's your Windows 365 device, and have them log into it. So I think that part of an organization's strategy should be long-term. How do we make Windows 365 part of our overall organizational endpoint management strategy? Just as a secondary failover, we talked business continuity. A failover would be, immediate. You've scaled up. Well, a lot of organizations were kind of caught that they didn't have computer equipment to send home with their employees. So either employees had to come get their desktops, or they had to go purchase non-standard devices. I think even a few of our clients went to Best Buy. They were desperate to get some sort of device in the hands of their employees so that they could be, able to work. So, from my perspective, Windows 365 is really a supporting mechanism if something were to happen like this again, because we can just simply scale the environment.
Yeah, so there were supply chain issues as well, like you said, where they couldn't just go to their hardware vendor. And they ended up going to places like Best Buy if they were lucky, right? Because Best Buy would run out to Walmart, Micro Center, and they're just buying all kind of oddball type, consumer grade hardware. So I think Windows 365 definitely would have come into play. But again, if there's ever a supply chain issue in the future outside of a pandemic, again, we have a solution, Windows 365. Not just that, but the cost per seat, right? I think it's worth looking at. So again, there's organizations that are going to end up going to Windows 11, but at the same time, if they had to hold on to older hardware, they could do so with Windows 365 for new hires, for vendors or whatever. They can, leverage Windows 365 again. There are companies that were spending, I forget how much money on FedEx overnight charges because all of the 21 offices had to ship their laptops back to headquarters, right? So they can be re-imaged, right? And so on and so forth. And I'm like, okay, so the bill was high. And I'm like, okay, so if you guys already have Endpoint Manager, let's just create DPs at each location. And do you know over the next 6 months how much those FedEx charges dropped? It was, significant. So you're looking at it's not just a budgetary thing, but it's also, hey, am I heading in the right direction? It's not like I'm only doing this to save money, right? I'm doing this because it is the better solution. It's the bigger solution.
Yeah. And I think, honestly, with the two new OSs that organizations are going to have to decide between, I think it's going to be a blend. I think what you do is you break down your implementation approach to, one, understand what you have in your environment, and then break it down by use case. That can be by business unit or, specific, care areas. If it's a hospital system, to say, I do not need an actual device to be refreshed here. This use case can go. So I think when people are looking at that canvas as to how do I modernize my desktop deployment strategy and what is that going to look like from an OS perspective, there needs to be the time to paint that canvas into a really strong implementation approach and what's going to make the most supporting operational environment that they can for their organization.
Okay, so we're at time. I just want to know if there are any last words, but prior to that, before I ask for last words, Emily, so Women in Tech, what's next for you?
Yeah, so a couple cool things. On September 7th, I'll be speaking at the Bridgeville Consulting Group talking about really resiliency when it comes to being a female in the tech world. There's definitely challenges that we face every day. So really speaking to that group. Also really exciting is that the Girl Scouts of Western New York have asked me to come and present to the Girl Scout troops locally here in the upstate New York area, and really talk about careers in STEM and what that looks like. And then towards the end of September, most likely the last week of September, we'll be hosting another panel session with some great female leaders within the tech industry, again, talking about resiliency, but also authenticity. You know, I think one thing that people lose because they try to fit into a different realm is being an authentic leader. And I think, unfortunately, females definitely try to conform to, you know, what's in the room, so to speak, sometimes. So really talking about the importance of being an authentic leader. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to hopefully streaming that also on LinkedIn Live to get the message out further. So thank you for asking. Lots of great stuff coming up over the course of the next month. I've committed towards this last half of 2021 of doubling down my efforts to make sure that we're driving equity in the workforce. I think as we get into 2022, we need to make it a very prime, top of mind conversation, have those tough meetings and tough, really, approaches to the way that we are doing outreach, the way that we're doing recruiting, and just making sure that at every step of the way, there's equity at the table.
Yep. No, listen, the reason why I asked you about the, what's next for women in tech, because one thing I do notice that out of all the webinars and the fireside chats that we had, there's a lot of good, positive energy in some of those sessions. And I noticed that people are well engaged, and sometimes, you guys don't even notice, but you're like 5 minutes past your time, and everyone just wants to keep going to the point. I think you've actually had some like after meeting interviews, right? Same day with some of the panelists. So I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we have.
Yeah, Mike, any last words?
Yeah, I would just say I'm kind of interested and excited to see kind of where this goes. Before virtualization, there was such a high cost of entry to get that into your organization, and I think this technology kind of takes a lot of those barriers away. All the on-prem infrastructure storage, the talent to support it, build it, deploy it. So interested to see where this goes.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say. So, and I'm going to piggyback off you. I was logged into an environment the other day, and it was vSphere, and I'm like, and I saw all these virtual machines, and I'm like, and the difficulty of jumping from here to there. I said, can we just do Windows 365? I got to figure out a way of demoing it, right? Because it's just, and I thought about it. How much is it costing? Right, but yeah, definitely Windows 365. When Microsoft was making all these changes with the cloud, when Office 365 first came out, I did not know where it's going. I don't know if I liked where it was going. Now I'm definitely excited every single time. And you know how it is, Emily. Inspire, Microsoft Ignite. We're like little kids in a candy shop. Just can't wait to see what's next. Well, guys, I appreciate everyone joining us. And remember, this is part 2, so we got a part 3 coming out very soon. And have a great day.
Thanks, Jose. Thanks, Mike.
Bye, guys.
Bye.